She hits you up when she's restless, lonely, or needs distraction. When you're finally free, she goes quiet. You're close enough to keep her entertained, but never close enough for her to actually stand beside you. And if you're honest, you feel it. That dull ache of being kept on the side, not claimed. Of knowing you're convenient, not chosen. A backup, not a priority. That feeling isn't you overthinking. It's your instincts trying to wake you up. Let me strip away the confusion. She isn't lost, torn, or trying to figure herself out. She has already placed you somewhere in her life. She knows exactly what she gets from you and what she doesn't feel she has to give in return. The issue isn't that you're unworthy. It's that you're playing a role that serves her comfort more than your self-respect. She gains. You bleed slowly. Women don't usually sit down and write lists of which man is in which category, but the sorting still happens. Emotionally, mentally, intuitively, we group men into roles. There's the man we deeply desire, the man we respect, the man we lean on. And then there's the man who is safe, endlessly available, and easy to lean on without committing. When you become that man, you turn into her emotional regulator and attention safety net. Ego regulation is the first thing at work. Whenever her self-esteem dips, the guy she really wants pulls away, or life makes her feel small, she reaches for certainty. She goes to the man she's sure will answer, respond, reassure, not necessarily because she longs for him, but because his presence props up how she feels about herself. You become her emotional bandage, not her choice. The second mechanism is backup attention. In modern dating, attention is a kind of currency. People treat replies, likes, calls, and compliments like a constant drip feed they're entitled to. Backup attention is her insurance policy. As long as you're around, she never has to fully sit with rejection, silence, or doubt. You absorb it for her. Then there's quiet mate switching. When it feels like there's always another option around the corner, many women don't fully choose until they feel they might lose something real. And nothing kills that urgency faster than a man who is constantly ready, waiting, and emotionally on call. So she keeps you near, but not near enough. There's no tension, no real risk, no decision required. This is where a lot of men misunderstand the situation. They assume that consistent effort will eventually be rewarded. They mistake patience for maturity. They believe that always being available will feel safe to her. From a female perspective, it often does the opposite. Desire doesn't deepen in a space with no stakes. Respect doesn't grow where access is automatic. Attraction doesn't expand around a man who gives more emotional certainty than she's earned. Men who make themselves endlessly available are rarely the ones who get seriously chosen. Not because they lack quality, but because they never create a moment where a decision is required. When you're effortless to keep, you're effortless not to claim. That's the dynamic we're going to flip. The first shift you need to make is stopping the habit of arguing for your own value. Most men lose power not when she pulls away, but when they feel the urge to clarify, justify, or explain who they are and what they've given. You write long messages, unpack your intentions, highlight your loyalty and effort, secretly hoping that if she just really understood you, she'd finally treat you differently. To you, that instinct feels noble. You're being honest, vulnerable, reasonable. You want fairness, you want to be seen accurately. But to many women, those long explanations don't land as clarity. They land as need. They feel like someone trying to be chosen instead of someone quietly knowing he is already enough with or without her recognition. When a man starts listing his qualities, motivations, and pain points, he doesn't sound like a grounded adult. He sounds like he's pitching himself. You shift without realizing it from being observed to being evaluated, from someone she is considering to someone trying to convince her. That subtle shift takes you out of your natural power. Attraction doesn't respond to essays. Respect doesn't suddenly rise because you made a strong emotional case. You are not a brand deck. You're not a proposal to be approved. The moment you begin arguing for why you matter, you silently tell her, I'm willing to stay here even if you don't see it. That's what drains your leverage. This is also why explanations rarely change how she behaves. At best, they might buy you a brief wave of reassurance, nicer messages, more frequent replies, softer language. But that's not the same as actual commitment. Someone can give you attention without giving you respect. They can soothe you for a moment and then slip right back into the same pattern because your speech didn't cost them anything. The shift happens when you stop trying to fix her perception and start letting your standards speak in your place. You don't rush to clarify every misunderstanding. You don't send a novel because she was distant. You don't chase emotional closure after every cold response. You allow silence where you used to give paragraphs. You allow space where you used to pour effort. From a woman's point of view, a man who doesn't argue for his value feels different. He's not aggressive, but he's settled. He doesn't beg to be seen, he allows people to reveal whether they can see. His worth shows up in what he walks away from, not in how beautifully he can describe his heart. When you stop explaining and start observing, you don't lose connection. You lose the illusion that more talking was ever going to solve a pattern she was benefiting from. This is where many men slip backwards. Right when they finally decide to stop over-explaining, she surfaces with a thoughtful message, or a vulnerable story, or a warm, I've been thinking about you. It feels like progress. It feels like proof that your patience worked, but most of the time, something simpler is happening. She felt your absence and wanted the comfort of your attention back, not necessarily you. This is why you must separate attention from investment. Women can offer attention freely because it doesn't cost them much. They can open up, flirt, and share pieces of their life while still keeping you in the exact same category. What matters is not how sweet one message is, but whether her overall pattern shows real risk, effort, and consistency. If her warmth shows up only when she senses distance, if she leans in only enough to keep you hopeful, if nothing ever solidifies no matter how close you get, you're not being chosen. You're being managed. The painful truth is this. If someone needs to be nudged, convinced, or repeatedly reminded to recognize your value, they're not failing to see it. They're comfortable not acting on it. Your job is no longer to look for promising moments. Your job is to look at the full pattern. Don't ask, did she text back? Ask, does this add up over time? When you evaluate the pattern instead of the peaks, the fog clears. You stop needing reassurance and start requiring alignment. Because your value isn't proven by how intensely she talks to you in certain moments, but by how consistently she shows up to earn continued access to you. The next shift is understanding that your boundaries aren't what you talk about. They're what you quietly enforce. Many men believe they have strong standards because they state them clearly. They tell her what hurts, what feels disrespectful, what they won't tolerate. They have heartfelt conversations, express disappointment, and articulate exactly what needs to change. Then the same behavior repeats, and nothing about their response actually changes. From her perspective, that doesn't look like strength. It looks like elasticity. It tells her, you can cross this line, I'll be upset, but I'll still be here in the same way. Human beings adapt quickly to whatever access rules were given. A boundary without consequence doesn't shape behavior. It becomes background noise, something you say, not something you live. This is where fear quietly runs the show. Men hesitate to enforce their own lines because they're terrified that if they actually step back, she'll decide not to follow. So they tolerate just a bit more, explain just a bit longer, and slowly trade away their self respect to keep the connection alive. They would rather be uneasy than alone. But what's more damaging than someone leaving when you assert your standards is someone staying while repeatedly crossing them. Every time you allow a clear violation and respond with another discussion instead of a shift in access, you lower your own price. The first time it happens, you send a warning. The second time, you signal permission. By the third, it has become the new normal. You've trained her that your words are negotiable. Real boundaries are behavioral, not theatrical. When she disrespects your time, you don't argue for hours. You simply become less available. When her effort drops, you don't plead for more. You match her level or disengage. When inconsistency shows up over and over, you don't chase certainty. You let distance happen and let the connection reveal whether it can survive without you carrying it. This isn't about punishing her or playing games. It's about regulating yourself. You're not cutting her off to cause pain. You're stepping back to protect your peace and your dignity. From a woman's psychological perspective, this is where true respect either starts or ends. A man who can calmly enforce boundaries without rage, guilt trips, or long justification sends a crystal clear message. My presence is conditional on being treated well. Women who are capable of genuine partnership won't test those lines repeatedly. When they see you mean what you live, they adjust if they care. The ones who keep poking, crossing, and minimizing your standards are telling you exactly why those standards matter. Your job is not to convince them. Your job is to listen. Once your actions align with your stated values, the dynamic shifts on its own. She either rises to meet the standard or she drifts out of your life. Both outcomes are wins because both preserve your self-respect. A woman who truly holds you in high regard rarely needs a lecture about where the line is. She can feel it in how quickly your energy changes when it's crossed. Now we move into the power center of all of this, reclaiming your direction. Nothing pulls a man out of backup option status faster than becoming deeply focused on where his life is going. You don't lose yourself in one dramatic moment. You slowly leak your identity away by letting your emotions orbit around her behavior. One late reply at a time, one anxious night waiting for a message, one canceled plan reshaping your whole week. Little by little, your days become reactive. You adjust your schedule depending on whether she might be free. You leave mental space open for her texts. You check your phone more than you check in with your own goals. Without noticing, she stops being a part of your life and becomes the axis it spins on. That's when you slip into emotional dependence. From a woman's body level intuition, this is obvious. A man without a strong internal direction feels heavy. He absorbs her moods instead of anchoring his own. He seems available but also subtly empty. Like his sense of purpose is waiting on external validation. No matter how kind he is, that lack of self-driven motion quietly lowers his position in her mind. Attraction is drawn to momentum, to clarity, to a man who is moving with or without her. That doesn't mean working yourself into burnout or pretending you're too busy to care. It means that your structure, your routines, projects, physical health, money, craft, or mission takes priority over waiting around for emotional crumbs. Pick goals that genuinely stretch you, not vague ideas, but concrete targets that demand consistency. Then build a daily framework around those targets. Time blocked for work, training, learning, rest, and relationships that pour back into you. And on the days when your motivation dips, you rely on the system you created, not on fleeting feelings. When your focus returns to creating something meaningful, your emotional state stops rising and falling with her attention. You stop overanalyzing her silence because you're too engaged in what you're building. Your brain has less room to obsess. Your self esteem starts coming from your own progress instead of her responses. From there, something subtle but powerful shifts in how she experiences you. You're no longer emotionally on tap. Your availability becomes naturally limited, not as a strategy, but as a side effect of having a full life. You don't need to pretend to be busy to seem valuable. You actually become busy with things that matter. This kind of quiet scarcity hits differently. When your time and presence are anchored in purpose, anyone who wants access has to fit into a life that's already in motion. You're not waiting to be invited into her plans. You're evaluating whether she aligns with yours. And a man living like that simply doesn't have room to be treated as a convenient fallback. Another major shift is choosing growth instead of chasing closure. On the surface, closure seems like the mature choice. You imagine one honest conversation that clears the air, honors your effort, and lets you walk away feeling resolved. But psychologically, what many people call closure is just attachment disguised as logic. Men often pursue closure because they want their pain witnessed. They want to believe their investment wasn't meaningless. They want answers that make the disappointment feel less personal. They hope that if she explains what happened, the emotional weight will finally lift. But when someone has consistently kept you as an option, they've already given you the clearest explanation possible: their behavior. Words can soften, spin, or excuse patterns. Actions cannot. When she took days to respond, prioritized everyone else, kept you in the gray area, or only showed up when it suited her, she was telling you where you stood. Asking her to now reinterpret that history in a way that comforts you is like asking the storm to apologize after it's already knocked your house down. The person who benefited from the dynamic is rarely equipped to repair the damage it caused, not necessarily because they're cruel, but because they were comfortable. She got the security of your presence without the responsibility of choosing you fully. That comfort blunts her ability to see the impact clearly, let alone heal it. The urge for closure keeps you orbiting the same point. You replay conversations, reread old messages, mentally rewrite the ending with a better explanation. Meanwhile, your real life, your habits, discipline, relationships, opportunities, waits on pause. You're still letting her choices decide how your nervous system feels each day. Growth asks a different question. Instead of, why did she treat me like this? Growth asks, what version of me kept accepting it? That question is forward facing. It pulls your focus back to your role, your patterns, your blind spots, and most importantly, your next steps. When you start directing energy into your routines, body, work, and friendships, your system begins to stabilize. Distance becomes your therapist. Time away from her stops being an empty ache and starts being data. You notice how much less reactive you feel. You realize how much brain space you have when you're not checking your phone constantly. Slowly, your identity shifts from the man trying to understand her to the man rebuilding himself. As that happens, the need for a final talk fades. The more you grow, the less compelling her explanations become. Not because you don't deserve the truth, but because you've created a life that no longer needs her version of it. The situation stops being a mystery to solve and becomes a chapter you've simply moved beyond. Closure keeps you facing backward, waiting for someone else's words to set you free. Growth turns you forward and hands the keys back to you. Once you begin genuinely outgrowing the mindset that tolerated being an option, the demand for answers goes quiet on its own. You don't heal because she finally explains. You heal because you finally evolve. The final step is learning to leave in a way that serves your peace, not your ego. Many men don't just want to walk away, they want to walk away and be understood. They want the speech, the last word, the moment where she realizes exactly what she lost. That hunger for recognition feels satisfying to imagine, but in practice, it keeps you tied to her reaction. From her perspective, emotional fireworks at the exit don't communicate strength. They communicate how deeply you're still entangled. The more intense your departure, angry paragraphs, ultimatums, dramatic declarations, the more you confirm that she still holds power over your state. Even if you mean every word, you're still performing for her attention. Leaving without drama is different. It isn't cold or vengeful, it's controlled. Your actions say, I'm choosing myself now, without demanding she clap for it. You don't announce that you're done, you simply are. You reduce your responses, stop initiating, stop making yourself available, and you do it without fanfare. This isn't ghosting out of cowardice. Ghosting is about avoiding discomfort. A clean, calm exit is about self-protection. You've already given more than enough information through previous conversations and efforts. You're not disappearing to punish her. You're ending your participation in a dynamic that was slowly dismantling your self-respect. Psychologically, this lands very differently than an emotional blow-up. She doesn't just feel a drop in affection, she experiences a cut in access. Love can fade gradually in the background. Availability can end in an instant. When your presence, reassurance, and attention are no longer on demand, the real impact of your absence registers, whether she ever admits it or not. For you, that quiet exit does something even more important. It returns your loyalty to yourself. You're no longer waiting to be seen or validated before you choose peace. You become the man who acts from his standards, not his spikes of emotion. And once you make that shift, you're not playing to win her understanding anymore. You're answering to your own reflection. Zooming out, this is bigger than one woman. You were never meant to handle her better. You were meant to outgrow the version of yourself that tolerated being handled like an option. When you focus on fixing the situation, you stay inside its rules. When you focus on becoming a man with solid standards, the situation either transforms to meet you or collapses on its own. A standard doesn't beg. A standard doesn't explain its worth on repeat. A standard doesn't remain available where it's only half valued. Some women will fall away when you step into that. That's not tragedy, that's filtration. You're no longer a fit for dynamics that required you to shrink, overgive, and wait. From a woman's viewpoint, the man who has boundaries, direction, emotional control, and self-respect is in a completely different category. He's not auditioning for a spot. He's deciding who he's willing to share his time and heart with. Not everyone will qualify, and that's exactly how it should be. Think back to where this started. Being texted when she was bored, ignored when you were free, kept close but never fully claimed. That wasn't proof of your lack of value. It was a sign you hadn't yet claimed your leverage. When you stop justifying yourself, enforce real boundaries, prioritize your mission, choose growth over closure, and exit quietly when necessary. You don't just stop being an option, you become the man who never accepts that role again. You don't need her to choose you to be complete. You choose self-respect first and let everything else rearrange around that. If this resonates, say it out loud or write it somewhere you'll see it daily. I choose self-respect. Because the moment that becomes your baseline, the entire way you relate, love, and allow access to yourself changes for good.